Hello, welcome in or welcome back to my channel. My name is Deb from DG Reads and I'm here today to kick off my vlog for TBRathon. TBRathon is a fantastic month-long readathon hosted by Leandra at the TBR0, and there are many ways you can play, but the way that I have chosen is the Paws Bookshelves game board, where you roll whatever dice you want and try to make your way around the board to get to the end of the board. There are ways you can kind of advance quickly, there are ways you can fall way back down. So we'll see how it goes. If you missed my January TBR, I did do my first two rolls already, so a little bit of a recap. My first roll took me to winter setting and I got to go up the ladder. So I did miss a chunk of the board. And because I missed that chunk of the board, in order to get the little puppy, I needed to pick a book that was under 300 pages and combine it with winter setting. For that one, I am going to be reading Hampton Heights by Dan Coyce. This is a gifted copy that I received from Harper Perennial. And this one says, it's one harrowing night in the most haunted neighborhood in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And it's a nice short novella. It's a horror, and it does say it's on a cold winter's evening in 1987. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail at this point, just because I haven't started it yet. I'm number one on the waiting list for the audiobook to go with this one, and since I have so many physical reads, I'm waiting for that one to come in to read this. And then I also did my second roll, and that one took me to most recent buy or borrow, and because I passed another dog spot on the board, in order to pick up that dog, I needed to read a genre blend. And for that one, I elected to read City of God and Monsters, and that one is by Kayla Edwards. And this one is a buddy read with Mel at Melanor Reads and Cassidy at Covers with Cassidy and their Patreons, and it's a blend of urban fantasy and romance, and it is a pretty chunky book. And I actually have started this one. It's on Kindle Unlimited, so I am reading it as an ebook, which means I'm reading it with my eyes, which is going a little bit slowly since I'm easing back into going to work at the office where I can't really just sit down and read a Kindle. So that one is in progress. I'm about at the 40% mark. We're following a young woman who is a human in a world where there are many different types of entities, whether they be vampires or demons or all sorts of things. And someone is after her and she doesn't understand why. She is out with her adoptive sister who's a witch and another friend, and this friend winds up getting captured trying to keep these people from getting to Lauren. One of the men who's been hired to find her is Darian, and he doesn't know who he's looking for when he takes on this assignment. And when he discovers who she is and that things seem a little fishy, he winds up protecting her instead of trying to capture her. And that's where the romance is going to build. That's where we're getting some looks into his life as well. He's got a big family. They're all very scary, fierce people, and the series name is House of Devils, and he is one of those devils of the House of Devils. So it's an interesting dynamic between the two, but I am finding it a slow read. It is over 700 pages, and I don't feel like for the amount we've gotten so far that it needs to be. This one gets compared to Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and I can see that comparison in the idea of it being an urban fantasy, having all different types of entities living within these bounds, different houses, and there are similarities in that, but I don't feel like you would find it too similar. There are some really cool world building elements in here, but I don't feel like we're getting the depth that I would want as a world building driven reader. The characters I'm generally liking, but again, I don't feel like we're getting enough depth to them, and so far at the point where I am now, I'm not tempted necessarily to DNF it, but I'm not rushing to pick it back up every time I put it down. So it's probably one I'm going to need to hold on to for a weekend where I have more time to be physically reading, and life is just chaos at the moment. So I decided I'm going to do my third roll.
Roll number 3. I've added these little stars so you can see where I've been. So most recently we were here, and we roll a 2. So we got 1 and 2, lowest rated. Oh, fun.
I landed on lowest rated, which is not a square I necessarily wanted to land on, but I looked at my Goodreads, and at least the one that is lowest rated is not a huge time investment, and that is The Exhibitionist by Charlotte Mendelson. This is a gifted copy I received from St. Martin's Press quite a while ago, so it is good that I'm getting the push to finally pick this one up. I don't really remember anything about it. I think ratings on Goodreads kind of scared me off a little bit. Blurb in this one says it's a dazzling, critically acclaimed novel of art, sacrifice, toxic family politics, queer desire, and personal freedom. The Hanrahan family is gathering because the famous artist and notorious egoist Ray is preparing for a new exhibition. His 3 children have come, and his wife, it says, is an artist too, and she's got secrets, and it sounds like she's going to shake things up because she's no longer going to be putting her husband and children first. Sounds like family drama for the most part, which I can get behind some of the time. And Kylie's now playing with a toy. So I should go ahead and leave this here, and I will be back once I have more thoughts on any of these books. I wanted to check in on how my Paws Bookshelves reading is going, and it's been a bit mixed. I've been continuing to make a little bit of progress on City of Gods and Monsters. I'm still not being fully drawn into it, and honestly, the motivation to keep hooking it up is a little bit low, but I did make a little progress on it last night, reading in bed before I fell asleep. So I'm not DNFing it at this point. We'll keep going. But speaking of DNFs, I did start my lowest rated book, which was The Exhibitionist, and I didn't make it too far in. I was, I think, less than 10%, and I just decided I didn't care, and I did decide to DNF this one. We're following a family, like I mentioned, and they don't like each other, and none of them are particularly likable. It's a lot of family drama, and partially, I think it's just a bad season of my life to be dealing with toxic family relationships, having recently lost my mother. I don't really want to delve into that quite at the moment. We're talking a lot in here about the father's ill health and what's going to happen once he's gone, and those discussions just aren't what I need in this present moment. So I'm going to count it as having fulfilled the square of my lowest rated book because I did pick it up, I did try it, and I'm clearing a book off my shelf. So that's a good thing too. We're embracing DNFing this year. If it's not working for me, put it down. So from there, I did do my next roll.
Roll 4 is a 1. So that gets me a hyped book, and I automatically get a puppy for that one.
And for this one, I got hyped book. And this could be many, many things. I have hyped books that are coming out this month, but they're a little ways off, so I didn't want to wait. But one I've been super, super hyped for, and I've actually already started it, but I'm going to give myself a win on this one and go into it. I still have almost 300 pages of it to read, so I think that's enough to count it for a square. And that is Malice by John Gwynne. This is the first book for FaithFallAlong, which is the latest edition of the Catch-Up Book Club, hosted by Becca at Becca and the Books. There's a live show for the coming weekend for this one, which by the time this vlog goes up will have already happened, so I'll link that below as well. It's on Becca's channel. And this is a book I've read before, but have forgotten a lot about, and I am absolutely loving my time back with it. I'm not going to give a lot of thoughts on this one in this particular vlog, just from the standpoint that I've mentioned it elsewhere, and there's a whole live show talking about thoughts on this one. But I will let you know kind of a general idea once I've finished it. Like I said, I'm past the halfway point. I've been tabbing it. I've been taking some notes because my biggest problem when I read this series the first time was I left too long between books, which won't be a problem because I have to be keeping up with the Catch-Up Book Club, but also just the sheer number of POVs keeps growing as the series goes on, and I started losing track of who was who, so I'm keeping a list for myself to hopefully help with that. But I'm having a fantastic time with this. It's definitely hyped. So many people in the Catch-Up Book Club Discord have been hyping this book up, and I've been eagerly waiting to read it because I didn't want to read it too soon with the live show being in January. Since Malice is going to be a reading process for the full next week, I am going to be kind of reading 50 to 70 pages a day in order to pace myself and get it finished before the live show. I decided to go ahead and do my next roll as well.
Roll number 5. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Ooh, I got lucky with another ladder, and it is a comfort genre.
And this one got me to a comfort genre, but if I want to pick up the dog that I passed, I need it to have D-O-N-G in the title. And this one was hard. This one had me searching my shelves, and I wound up with a book that works, but it is again a book that I've already talked about by the time this vlog goes up, because I'm going to be reading Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And this is a historical horror fantasy from my understanding. And it's one that I'm a little bit nervous about. It's long, it's nearly 500 pages. I'm not necessarily in a historical mood. It's a lot about pregnancy. We're at a home for unwed pregnant teens, and the idea of them getting into the occult by a book they are given and developing agency surrounding that. And there's a lot about this one that I'm nervous about, but it's Grady Hendrix, who's an author that I love. So I will link for you the Architect video where I will go into more depth with this one, but I will give you kind of a final thoughts type of update in this vlog as well, because I feel like I'm picking a lot of books that are overlapping with other videos and so forth. So let's see how this one goes, and then hopefully I will get into some more books and continue making my way up the path of the board game. So far it's been going well, but I feel like there's some backsliding that's going to happen at some point, because that's just kind of my luck. Okay, I'm back with some updates. I've made some progress on my Paws Bookshelves books, so let's get into it. Grady Hendrix. I finished Witchcraft for Wayward Girls, and like I mentioned, I'm not going to go into great detail in this one. I will have already linked the video where I did talk about it, my midway thoughts and my final thoughts, but this one wound up just not being a book that necessarily was tailor-made for me. It's very much historical with fantasy witchcraft elements and then some horror elements mixed in as well, but I wouldn't say the horror, which is the reason I made this a comfort genre for me, really stood out a lot. But even the fantasy witchcraft stuff almost doesn't come in until the second half of the book. The first half is very much about the pregnancies, about their bodies. There's some horrific things that are done to these girls in the name of having healthy pregnancies, but it was horror in the way that things were done horribly, but not so much what I expected out of a horror. So it wasn't a big win for me. I think it was well written. I think the characters were well done. I wound up giving it a 3.5. I'm making good progress on Malice. I have about 150, a little less than 150 pages to go with that one. I have not picked back up City of Gods and Monsters since we last spoke, but I am planning to get back to it. And I still don't have my audiobook for Hampton Heights. So I am going to go ahead and move on to the next roll.
And the next roll is off camera, but it's a 4. There we go. And that puts us, we started here, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we go all the way back down to lowest rated. Fun again.
So this was not a super ideal roll. We wound up falling. We were almost to the end of the board. We wound up falling. I knew it was going to happen eventually. Of course it was. So that put me back on lowest rated, and I debated with myself if I was going to pick up another low rated book from my shelves, but the one that it would be doesn't have an audiobook I can get from my library, so that had me even more wary about picking it up at the moment when I have so many physical reads I need to do. So I'm going to take a page from Leandra's book. When Leandra did her Paws Bookshelves TBR, if she landed on the same space twice, she didn't pick a new book. And I think that's what I'm going to do here. If I wind up falling down to this space a third time because the game punishes me for this decision, then maybe I'll do it. We'll see. But hopefully that won't happen. So next roll.
Okay, starting from lowest rated, which now has a 2 star. Not sure it deserved it, but let's see what we get next. We got 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we're back to comfort genre, which puts us back up above again.
This put us back on comfort genre, and this one I'd be much more happy to pick a book for, but if I'm going to be consistent, I decided I would go ahead and skip this spot as well, since I've landed on it twice now. And really, the book that I wanted to read for this is Onyx Storm, which is not out yet, and I want to keep moving. So let's see if we can do one more roll and hopefully get a book.
We want anything anything that is not a 4 this time. So, roll number, I've lost count. 3. We can do 3. So that's 1, 2, and 3. A 2025 goal read that has a favorite trope in it.
So I needed anything except a 4, and I got a 3. So thankfully I did not land again on the spot that would send me back down to lowest rated. And this one got me a 2025 goal, and I have a few of those. So it was one that gave me a lot of options. But if I wanted to pick up the dog that I passed, I also needed a favorite trope. I decided to go with Rest Stop by Nat Cassidy, and this one also is one that doesn't have an audiobook, but that's okay because it's short, and it's one I'm highly anticipating, and I've seen people I know and trust really love this one, so I'm excited for it. In terms of it being a 2025 goal, this is a prompt ball book. I had a prompt to read a book under 250 pages. It's also a book that is on my 25 in 25, so it fits that perfectly. And in terms of tropes, my understanding is this is an isolated setting, set in a rest stop that is pretty much out in the middle of nowhere. So I think that will work. I love a good isolated setting when it comes to my horror and thriller reading. So this one I'm really excited for. And then hopefully our next roll will get us done with this board. That would be exciting. And hopefully we don't roll a 1 to land back on the spot that will send us back again. So we'll see. But this is one I definitely look forward to getting back to you with an update. I'm back with some updates for TBRathon, and they're not exactly going the way I thought they would. So let's talk. I said multiple times I was not planning to DNF City of Gods and Monsters. You may have known better than I did that that's not exactly true. I have not picked it up in a few days now, and I have so many other things that I want to read more that the fact that I'm making myself pick this up and chip away at it is just not the vibe I want for this year. I did say I was going to get better at embracing DNFs this year, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. I talked to some of the people who have read it as part of the buddy read, and it doesn't sound like it improves a whole lot on the things that I want out of it. So what I'm doing, taking their advice, is putting a pin in it, setting it aside, and if they continue on in the series and start loving it, then maybe I'll get back to it. But for now, this is feeling like at most it would be a 3-star. Right at the moment, I'd say more like a 2.5. So it's too long to put that much energy into it if I'm not feeling like I'm going to eventually love it. So I set that one down. And then I said all along I've been waiting for the audiobook for Hampton Heights to show up. And it did this morning. I was so excited until I learned that my library card at that particular library expired. And it's one that I can renew, but certainly not on a Sunday, and certainly not without driving a distance to go do that. So I started reading this physically this morning, and I'm now 88 pages into it, which is getting close to the halfway point. It's not a long book. And this one is going pretty well so far, thankfully. It is a horror book following a group of young delivery boys and the man who manages them for a lesser known newspaper in Milwaukee, from what I understand. And they are being taken to Hampton Heights, and they are going out to their canvassing with a reward of a dinner at Burger King when all of this is over. And the boys are very excited about this. This is set in the late 1980s, and I think it's delivering those 1980s feelings really well. There's references to things like Weird Al Yankovic. There's just that feeling of being in a world where parents were okay sending their kids out after dark into a local neighborhood to go door to door, and feel like that was a wise decision for the most part. We are finding out that Hampton Heights is not a normal place. There's a lot of spookiness going on here. The manager, Kevin, not the best guy either. He's off drinking in a bar pretty heavily, considering he has to then drive these kids home. These kids are sitting in the back of a van with no seatbelts, no seats. All of that definitely has some things that remind me of my childhood, remind me of the 80s. And it's very much a boy humor book. There's some fart jokes, and there's just things that are definitely a little outside of my humor comfort zone, but I think the creepy elements in here are done well. It's almost like short stories, interconnected short stories, because we get basically Kevin's evening in one rather long chapter, and then we get two of the boys and their whole story until they come back to the van, and then I think we're going to move on to two of the other boys and what's been happening with them. And I'm enjoying this one. It's definitely got some extreme moments. It's definitely got some bodily function moments. It's got some interesting things happening in here. I mean, the cover itself, you can see the nod to Burger King in the emblem up there. You see some of these creatures that give you a little bit of a hint of what's going on in this Milwaukee neighborhood. The really junky van that they're using for their paper routes and for this venture into this new neighborhood. It's a very interesting time so far. So I'm eager to continue it. Excited to have something that I am enjoying. And then I think with this, and then I will be reading Rust Stop as well physically. With those two books, I think if we can get the die to behave and roll a decent number and not send us way back on the board, I think those might be the final books for this readathon TBR. So we'll see. I'll check back in when I finish this one and give you an update. I had to prioritize a couple other books in the meantime, but I have now finally finished up Hampton Heights, and overall I had a good time with this one. It's definitely delivering on the 80s feels, almost too much in a couple of moments. There's things like boys using the word gay in a very derogatory way that I could have done without. It made sense for teenage boys in the 80s to say something like that, but it wasn't necessary in here. I think there's definitely trigger warnings here for homophobia, for racism, for a lot of different things like that. So do go in aware of that. It does continue to very much be kind of short stories like, where each kind of set of kids plus Kevin, their manager, each has their own kind of chunk of the story, and timelines overlap between those. And then, as in the beginning where we had kind of the intro where they all get together and get in this van and go off to Hampton Heights, at the end we get a chapter with all of them coming back together. It is weird, it's strange, it does kind of feel like there's some unanswered questions by the end of this one, but in an entertaining way. We got to meet the creatures from the cover. We get a mix of things, werewolves and witches and ogres, and just kind of a very bizarre sort of setup to this neighborhood that is Hampton Heights. So I had a good time with this one. I'm settling on a 4-star. It's on maybe the lower end of a 4-star, but still 4 stars. And this is one I think you could like if you like interconnected short stories, if you like a little bit of weirdness and creature feature with your horror. I think this is one that would be worth checking out. And then I immediately picked up Rust Stop by Nat Cassidy after finishing that one, and I am now almost 40 pages in, and I meant to do an update sooner, but this is one that just one more chapter keeps coming into mind, and I wind up flipping and starting a new chapter before I even realize it. The chapters are on the relatively short side. I mean, the book is on the relatively short side. It's only 124 pages maybe. So this one, the setup, we've got this man Abe, and he's driving because his grandmother is on her deathbed, and he's driving. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. There's a snowstorm. Not the best driving conditions, but he's been procrastinating making this drive. He has very complicated feelings about his grandmother. He has very complicated feelings about his own Jewish identity, and there are a lot of things in here about anti-Semitism, about racism, because his grandmother hasn't treated people around her always the nicest. In any case, he's driving along. He makes a pit stop thinking he's going to load up on some sugar and caffeine to get him through the rest of this drive, get him through the rest of this night, and he stops in a bathroom to pee. And things go wrong. And basically, it's an isolated setting. We've got insect and snake involvement. He talks about that right on the first page, so if those things are no-goes for you, don't pick this one up. I have just kind of gotten into the meat of it, let's say, and it's got me hooked. So I think this is going to be a really quick binge for me today. And then I did decide to go ahead and do my next roll. Since I am now all caught up, this is the last book I've got picked out that I need to finish.
Hopefully our final roll, because we do not want a 1. And let's see what we get. A4. We have finished. So 1 and finished. Yay.
And as you can see, my final roll, I did get lucky. I didn't wind up going back again, and I am now done with the board. So once I finish up this book, I will be back to wrap things up. As expected, it did not take me that long to finish up Rest Stop, and this was such a good horror one-sitting type of read, and I had a fantastic time with it. It definitely took some creepy moments. It definitely had some twists and turns and gore, lots and lots of gore, and a little bit over the top gore in a few places, but not something that really scared me, I wouldn't say. But there are images in here that I think will stick with me, and that's about what I'm looking for when it comes to a horror book. So this one was very successful. I think this is a 5-star horror for me. Nat Cassidy continues to be an author that I trust to give me a good read, so I look forward to reading more from him in the future. So with that, we finished the Paws and Bookshelves game and collected all the puppies along the way, although of course I already have the cutest possible pup right here at home. I had a fantastic time playing along this month for TBRathon. Thank you to Leandra for creating this really fun board game to participate in. I definitely had some wins with my reading, some that didn't go quite according to plan, and surprisingly really only one setback in the progress around the board. So I would say this was a pretty successful venture. Let me know in the comments below, were you participating in TBRathon this month? And if so, how did it go? Did you have a favorite along the way? I think for me, probably Rest Stop is the one that's going to stick in my mind the most from my read this month, although I had a few good ones. If you weren't participating, let me know. Do you have any pets? Do you have any dogs in your house? I'd love to hear about them as well. And if you could hit that like button below, I would surely appreciate it. And subscribe if you're interested in more Kylie content, more readathon participation, and more of my bookish content in general. But for now, I'll go ahead and leave you here. Go play with this one, and see you real soon in a new video.